Welcome to the Unsecurity podcast. Each week, Evan and Brad give an inside look at current information security news, breaches, best practices, and other things you should know to improve your information security. Here are your hosts, FRSecure's Evan Francine and Brad Nye.
All right. Good morning. Today is Monday, September 9th. This is episode 44 of the Unsecurity podcast. Getting close. That's 10 months now that we're doing this. I'm Brad Nye, your host today. In studio with me is Ryan Cloutier. Cloutier. I was close. And joining us by phone from Bulgaria is Evan Francine. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So,
you know, from Bulgaria, there's bound to be a delay. So my apologies.
Well, if you saw on my tweet, that's why it's the Brad and Ryan show V2 with Evan chiming in. I think you did it last time Ryan joined too.
Well, what's the deal?
Yeah. I don't know. Something against Ryan. I don't know what it is yet.
So, episode 44. Evan, like I said, is off in Bulgaria for the week and doing all kinds of world traveling because he's an author. So today, joining me in studio, as I mentioned, is Ryan. I didn't mess it up. Cloutier. Cloutier. At some point, we'll get it right. Ryan is an amazing InfoSec expert on a mission that I really do agree with. Back on episode 27 in May. Seems like a lot longer ago than that. He was joining me in studio. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So, Evan, you're in Bulgaria. What's going on over there, Evan?
Just a bunch of Bulgarian things, I think. No, I'm actually here. We have a team of 10 Bulgarians who work for us on Security Studio. So this is an opportunity to come and, show some goodwill, hang out with them for a few days. They just moved into a new office, so they're pretty excited about that. So we get to see that, break bread, that kind of thing, and then try to find internet somewhere so I can get some work done.
Well, good luck with that last piece. I would say, having seen what they've done in the latest release, give them a round of applause for me. It's the tool is amazing what they've done with it.
Yeah, I agree. And they're awesome people, man. I say that about a lot of people, but they're all committed. You should see this old office that they're moving out of. I mean, it's like it almost seemed like a sweatshop. Offices here are very small, and they're all just pounding out awesome code. So bought into the mission of fixing the broken industry, and now they get to go into this new office where there's air conditioning, and it's like finally feel like you're doing them right.
Well, that'd be good. It's always nice to take care of your people. So,
right.
Yeah, it's early. Well, not for you. You're probably all jet lagged, so you don't know if
it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here.
It's just 7 a.m. All right, so we're moving on. We brought Ryan on the show again because we love his perspective on helping the quote unquote normal people, or as you like to call them, humans. So it's a great mission. But before we cover that, let's talk about some common questions we get about liability. So first of all, disclaimer, we're not lawyers. This does not qualify as legal advice. This is not official legal advice. I don't know what else I can say to disclaim that.
We're not lawyers, nor do we play one on TV.
Yes, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But we do work with lawyers a lot when we're working on breaches. So, Evan, I know you specifically had a couple of things around the liability. Do you want to get started with that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So last week I wrote an article about, what does an information security assessment do for you in terms of, protecting you against liability? Information security assessments aren't, the sexy part of security per se. but they go a long ways towards protecting you from liability. For one, it shows that you took security seriously enough to diagnose what your problems are. And I think, it's like trying to fix a car. You don't fix a car without diagnosing the issues first. But it brought up a whole series of other questions, so we can kind of start the debate there if you want.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I think when we're working on this, lawyers are always going to ask, well, what did you know and when did you know it? And going, I didn't know, they don't like that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a viable excuse anymore,
No.
Right? Ignorance to the problem is not an excuse.
Yeah, when's the last time you saw one of, even, just looking at HIPAA, because that's kind of the most common place you see this. When's the last time you saw that lowest tier where it was like, I didn't know, basically? You don't see that anymore for fines.
You don't. And I think, I forget which circuit court it was, but a judge had ruled that an employer had a common law obligation to protect their employees' data. So to see us moving in that direction, to have it referred to as common law,
that's big.
That's a huge issue, and it's a definite indicator that as a society, I think we're getting to a point where we are going to start holding folks more accountable to data privacy, to security. We have that expectation if we're using their product or service. So
unless you're Equifax, and now they're like trying to get out of having to pay the $125. Sorry.
Well, and there's certainly liability in the courts, but there's also liability, when I think a lot of people haven't been in a breach situation. And when you think about it, now I have to defend myself against customers, against the board is going to be asking questions. I have to answer to, the court of public opinion. So there's a lot of things that are just outside of even being, sued in civil court. You've got administrative law too, where regulators are issuing fines, and you don't have really a recourse to that. When you appeal an administrative fine, you're appealing to their court, with their jury, with their judge. So I think a lot of people don't think about that.
I'll build on that. Last night I was having dinner with a friend of mine, and he runs a pretty successful business doing software development out of India. And he had a third party, so he was adjacent to a breach. But during the investigative period of about 8 months, all payments to him were frozen by the affected party while they figured out whether or not his company was liable for this ransomware event, or whether they came in through, a vehicle of his company's, utilization of their systems.
Wow.
And, all told, I think he said they backlogged almost $500,000.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to have to float.
And to try to float that and keep, his staff going. Ultimately, he was vindicated, and, they released all payments. But, for about 8 months, his payments were frozen, and his brand was negatively impacted because, well, why is this company, that you do business with now,
right,
not paying you? So,
and even, Evan mentioned the board and the current breach we're working on. They're definitely, our contacts are definitely starting to feel the heat. You can hear it in their voices, the stress, and, their questions. It's not a fun position to be in, to go, well, I thought we were protected, but we were wide open, and how did we not know? Because you didn't do anything.
Right. Well, and I think it's hard for executives right now to understand just how far to go. They hear a lot about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The security folk will come in and we'll try to tell them what's going on, but sometimes we don't speak English or human, and so they don't understand exactly what we need to do. So sometimes the protections that we ask for are seen as maybe too much, or not a good financial investment until after the fact. I see that a lot as well.
I wrote this article last week, and it'll be published sometime probably this week. And, I sort of started the article out with, some people say there are no guarantees in information security, and that's not true. There are guarantees. One guarantee is that you're going to have a breach. So that's an absolute, no matter what you do, That's a guarantee. And then the second guarantee comes out of that. You're going to need to defend yourself. It's just who you're defending yourself against. And so if you kind of play that out, because many people, like I said, haven't been through this before, but we've been through it enough times where we know what's the first question that's going to come out of their mouth, or at least one that we better have an answer to is, what did you do to prevent this?
Yeah.
And you have to have a good answer. Saying I don't know, well, or I went out and bought a bunch of blinky lights. Well, great. Did you do an assessment? Do you know what your most significant risk is? If you don't have answers to those questions, then that opens up a whole other line of questioning that I don't think people are protected or people are ready for.
Yeah. Well, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't ready for that first one even, right? I think that's the problem is, and then they get to that next level and they're just drowning.
Well, so I was doing some kind of I backed into some research, where it's funny because I was raising money for Security Studio. I was trying to figure out what's the total addressable market for information security assessments and what's the market today. So the market today, there's about $1 billion spent on information security assessments. That market is expected to grow to 6.5 million in the year 2025. The total addressable market, if you assume about $6,000 per assessment, which is actually low, is $24 billion. So if you work through all that math, you sort of come to this conclusion that 90 to 92% of all companies in the United States don't do an information security risk assessment.
Yeah,
So I guess that means that 90% of companies aren't ready to answer that first question.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up too, and I think the insurers have a role to play here. A lot of the insurance companies, aren't holding that bar. They're not saying you have to do an assessment of a particular framework.
The 3-page paper they send out for the millions of dollars of coverage.
It's awful.
Cover everything?
No, and here's worse yet. A lot of times it does cover, which then just perpetuates the problem that we have.
That's what they're using, but it doesn't actually give you a good idea.
And what I see as a trend is that we have all these insurance providers that are cutting these policies that either are not adequate in protection, or they do, provide good monies, but don't set good boundaries.
Right.
And it's the only area in insurance. And again, full disclaimer, not a lawyer, not an insurance agent, not a licensed representative of any insurance entities in Minnesota or other 50 states. But the point is that they cut these policies of multiple millions of dollars of coverage with little to no expectation that the policy, the person being covered or the entity being covered, does a darn thing to change their security posture. Maybe it asks for some security awareness training. And we all know how lovely that is these days, right? It's maybe we can get Eddie Murphy to help us do some security awareness videos. But the one and done approach, well, then then 2 months later after that training, somebody gets something, they click something, they get blackmail, whatever that is. And because the insurance company pays, I see two things. I see it encouraging more ransom, and I see it encouraging a lackluster attitude in the leadership of these organizations because, and I quote, "But Ryan, we don't have to worry about that. We've got cyber insurance."
Right. Well, and I think what's interesting is I was talking
there's
with,
that, and then what's the number one thing that if you ask that question, what have you done to prevent this? A breach, which again is a guarantee, given it's a function of time. The answer you get more often than not, well, we spent X number of dollars on security last year, which speaks nothing to whether those were good dollars or bad dollars. Because I would think it would almost make you more negligent if you spent information security dollars on things that weren't significant risks. So I think it's a dangerous, and we need to shift this paradigm from how many dollars I spent to where I spent them.
I'd agree. And I was going to say, I had a conversation, 3-6 months ago with an insurance person.
There's a lot of silence now.
Can you not hear me, Evan? Hello? Evan?
Are you still with us?
Huh? All right, we may have lost him. So anyway, it got really quiet there. the conversation I had was the guy was saying, we would not insure a building without physically walking through and doing an inspection of it, but we're writing millions or tens of millions of dollars for cyber insurance and have no idea what we're insuring. There's just nothing there.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up. I have several buddies in insurance as well, and they have matrices for every other risk. They could tell you how likely it is for a tree branch to fall on a 2007 Hyundai in southeastern Minnesota
on a particular day.
Exactly, at a particular time of the day.
Right.
But they have no quantifiable measures, no qualitative measures even for what is cyber risk, right? How do you effectively measure and then price that? Right.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting, especially as they they're paying out a lot more ransomware. There goes Evan. And the insurance companies don't like paying out if they don't have to, so they're going to want to.
And it's crazy because ransomware is the only crime where the victim has to be complicit after the fact in order for it to be a crime.
And as Evan said, it's actually pretty easy to prepare for. Right? Yeah, good backups, air gapped.
Yes, yeah. Take them offline. Back them up. I was just talking about that last night. Actually, there's projects folks are working on, and they were asking me about how best to defend those projects against ransomware. And I said, it's old school, guys. Make a backup and then take it offline.
Yep.
Thumb drive, tape, disconnect the NAS, something.
Yeah, just have it in a different. Yeah,
just offline. That's
away
the big
from
thing.
That network. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll take out of that. As it says, the key is to do things that a quote unquote reasonable person would do in your circumstance, and that a whole nother can of worms. We'll address it another time. Is what's reasonable, but I think we can agree that not doing anything is not going to be good. At least start with an assessment and understand where you're at and where your risks are.
I completely agree. It is you have to be able to see what you want to protect. Mm-hmm. And an assessment is where we start getting that visibility.
Right.
And that's what I tell folks.
And honestly, it's not the be all end all ever, right? It's not
a one-time starting
point. But it's somewhere, at least you can say, I've done something, I identified my risk, and I've got a plan of action. Here's what I've done.
Absolutely. In some cases, it's for smaller organizations, it's the first time they've identified their assets.
Yeah.
So, it can have multiple benefits.
Not necessarily small. All right. So we'll switch gears a little bit. So Ryan, you've got, this desire to help humans secure themselves, and it is something that we share here at FRSecure. So you recently posted an open letter to the security community on Evan's blog, and you're speaking to crowds all over the U.S. Let's talk about that. First of all, you want to talk just a little bit about your post on Evan's blog?
Yeah. So a few weeks back, I decided to craft an open letter to the InfoSec community, but really IT in general. And the intent of this letter was to help folks understand that, and Evan likes to talk about it as normal and abnormal. I generally say, speaking human or speaking not human, Techianese, right? What I noticed is there's a generational barrier and gap in communication. Mm-hmm. Analog has trouble speaking to digital. So our analog humans, those of us born before 1980, speak a slightly different language than those of us born after 1980. And it gets worse once you go past born after 1990. Yep. And this communication gap is allowing these scammers to scam more, because we can't have a community conversation at the dinner table where we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And the other thing I notice is the cognitive dissonance, if you will, in some of the analog humans when it comes to the physical impact of digital technology use. So that's what kind of inspired me to write the letter. And really, it was a plea or a cry for help, if you will, to the InfoSec and IT community to say, we've got to stop with the tech jargon. Similar to how we expect our medical professionals to be able to explain it to us in terms we can easily understand. Most of us go to the doctor. They don't open up with the Latin, right? They don't start telling you all the medical terms. They don't, they say it's an arm. They don't, use a medical term to explain your body parts a lot of times, right? Or they use a colloquial term. And if you don't get it, they work with you until you do. And that really is the big ask to the InfoSec and IT community is, speak in regular, plain, non-technical jargon and work with your user until they have that aha moment. Mm-hmm. And if all of us started to do that, I think we could actually get ahead of ransomware. We could get ahead of some of this cyber crime because we'd be able to create an environment of healthy skepticism.
Yeah. So one of the things I think we talked about last time I do is the ISC Squared has that safe and secure online. Mm-hmm. So I'd volunteer for that. And I think they have a really good way of putting it. It's digital immigrant and digital native.
Yes.
Right. It's the exact same thing. It's just another kind of way to phrase it. I actually had saw somebody, I'd done the parents presentation back in February. I saw him over the holiday weekend, and the mom comes up and just starts, "Oh, you did that," and she remembered those things, and she's like, "I've changed my passwords now; they're all this, and I'm using whatever LastPass or Dashlane. I don't remember which one, but it was so encouraging to hear 6-7 months later that she was still so excited. That if you can connect to the people and get them that aha moment, sticks with them.
Absolutely. I've had folks come up to me even several years after the fact to tell me the impact. I had one lady, she unfortunately was dealing with some early passing in her family. One of her family members had passed away a little bit earlier than folks would have wanted. And helping her navigate how to deal with a decedent's identity and the security you need to have around a decedent and a decedent's identity. And while it's probably one of my toughest moments in information security, it's also one of the most rewarding. She came back about, I think it was the next year, the year after, so 1 or 2 years later, and let me know that, based on what she learned in my seminar that I had given, he went back and checked, and mind you, this family member of hers had only been passed for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. Found, I believe she said 5 open accounts of new credit since past. And so, as the person who was ultimately responsible for their estate, they were very grateful, to work through that. But just raising a general awareness that that's something to take care of now.
Right.
10 years ago, that wasn't a checklist on the what do we do when a family member passes away. And now it needs to be. And same with when they're born.
Right.
Maybe the day a child's born isn't the day to get a social security number.
Well, or do you know to put freezes on your child's credit?
Exactly.
Yeah. You don't want them to do it. We were sitting here with Evan, in Bulgaria. It kind of just, it's the same thing as speaking a foreign language, really. We wouldn't go, Evan goes to Bulgaria. He's not going to expect to be able to tell them in English or understand there's got to be that translation. Especially like you said, it's somewhat in the 80s, really the 90s. And I mean, anybody born after 2000, they've only ever known a world basically with smartphones and tablets and
one of the things I like to say is, if you're not fluent in an emoji, you need to get there. If you've got kids, you better be fluent in emoji because they speak a different language. They use hieroglyphics. We use spoken word.
Right.
It's a very different form of communicating. And I will say as well, because we don't speak their language, and this is part of the cry for help, and I hope to start with the IT community because I think they're going to be most receptive to understanding why they need to make these changes. But it's about helping to keep the kids safe too. It's about, a lot of parents, when I do my talks, don't understand that the chat inside of video games is the primary vehicle for ugly people to get to their children, right? And that, the chat feature on Roblox, for example, right? Not to pick on Roblox, was a very popular app among young kids. And a lot of parents don't even know it has a chat feature.
Right.
So, and part of that is they stopped listening to us. I joke that everybody was super into what the IT people had to say until they heard what they had to say.
It's almost like, I think they feel like you're talking over for them.
Right. Well, again,
because they don't understand it, and
jargon.
you're just and I catch myself doing it, you know, because you're in it all day and you start using the acronyms and it's that like second nature. My wife, even the other day, it was like, I was telling her something about this breach and she's like, I don't understand a single thing you just said. And I've been talking for like 10 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I get
so easy to happen.
You know, at home for me, it's my wife's pretty cute about that. I'll get to go on and she'll just kind of look over and go, I don't know what any of that was, but it sounded really great.
Yeah, that's basically the response I got. Did you, so Ryan and I have been kind of going on. Evan, did you join back in?
I did.
Okay. Anything to add? We'll get you involved.
Yeah, these Bulgarian telco is funny. It's almost like Mexico, but I don't know if it's better or worse. No, you're exactly right. I mean, the key to communication is understanding, right? It doesn't matter if I'm using the right words or if I'm using the right, punctuation. It's, do you understand what I'm saying? You know, are you getting the message that I'm giving off as it's intended? And we miss the boat oftentimes on that. I mean, we might be using the right words, but if it's not being received by the people we're communicating with, then it's wrong. And we have to figure it out. It's either they figure it out or we do. And I think the onus is on us to do that.
Yeah. You know, and, you know, kind of the next thing is what can we do or what ideas for solving the problem? And I think, you know, what you're doing in speaking, and, you know, I'm actually going to be speaking at one of the local PTOs in a couple weeks. And same thing, the mom went to the one in February and said, can you come speak to all the parents at the school? And, you know, just getting out there and talking, I'm going to speak at the Association of School Business Officials end of October. Same thing. Like,
absolutely.
These are people that don't get it. You got to get out there and
well, and they're the decision makers, you know,
right.
And I'm glad to hear you're doing that, because that's where the message needs to start making its way back into the community. I've got one I'm doing here, I don't know, I think January timeframe or something with the Minnesota School Board Association. And I go out and talk to schools, you know, with back to school. Last few weeks, I did a few kickoffs. I was down in Houston a couple of weeks ago doing a very large school district down there. I think over the course of 5 days, I probably spoke to about 16,000, give or take. And the core thing was each individual has an individual responsibility. And they all kind of perked up and went, we do?
Right. Yeah.
And it's that we haven't, to Evan's point, the onus is on us because we have failed to get them to understand that they're participating too.
Right.
We've failed to explain their role. And I'll go back to the doctor analogy. You know, you go to the doctor to get something taken care of. That doctor says, these are the things you need to do when you get home. So yes, I stitched up the leg, and yes, I'm going to, here's some medications. But if you don't take these antibiotics as prescribed, your leg's going to fall off.
Right.
If you don't take the pain medication, you're going to have a very miserable time. So even though I might not understand the ins and outs of how my leg is built or what the medical terms for all the parts of my leg are, I know enough about how to use it to get where I'm going. And the doctor describes to me in simple enough language my role in participating. And I'm arguing that we need to do the same
I would agree
in all of technology. Let's simplify it. You know, make it work like my iPhone. You know, I hear that all the time. Make it as easy as my iPhone. So I think, you know, that's our challenge. But I also say the hardest thing in the world that you can do is make something easy.
Yeah, no, especially, you know, in IT or security, it's not. These aren't simple systems, right? They are very complex.
They are
a lot of moving parts,
but they don't have to be complicated. I think we can have complexity without complication.
Yeah, especially when you're translating it, right? I think you're right. That's going to be the key, is getting people to understand. Hey, we can't do this if we don't have all these people on our side. It's just, at the end of the day, we're outnumbered. We cannot. They're the first line of defense. Well, you've got to get to them.
And I'd say to security folk too, don't worry about being right. Stop worrying about being right. Start checking for understanding. It doesn't matter if you described it. I had an engineer light me up once for speaking about something in an engineering context. I said I wasn't talking to engineers.
Right.
I was talking to regular humans. I needed my message to land, and nitpicking to death the specificity of this was not going to get the message to land with the end user.
Some sort of minor.
Yeah, and I was absolutely in the wrong in an engineering context. I had screwed up order of operations, which meant nothing to my end user that I was trying to get to change behavior. I was simply using an analogy, an example, to explain it enough to where they went, okay, I get how that works like this other system I understand. Right. So now I can have my aha moment. And it's always the IT guys that want to, jump on to, no, you misspoke that. It wasn't 100% perfect. I'm going, yeah, I had 10 seconds to change this person's opinion on something. Yeah, and I wasn't going to do it by talking engineering.
4 and 5 of 10.
Right. So I would say that's a big part of it is kind of, we got to stop when it comes to trying to behavior with our users, focus more on the message and less on beating them up for poor behavior.
Well, and I think, you're right. And going, we get too low level, right? We're just so technical, in the weeds. Right? Yeah, exactly. You've got to go higher level. You've got to, like you said, simplify it. The majority of the users are not those digital natives at this point, right? It's starting to transition.
Well, and they may never be. I don't, I have a friend of mine. He's a financial actuary. I don't ever want to know what he knows. I have no interest in it. I don't care to know those things. I'm never going to be that expert, nor do I want to be. But there's a few things he knows about finance that are very applicable to my daily financial life. So talk to me like I'm a second grader. I'm okay with that.
Right.
Explain it to me, and I want it in a soundbite. We live in a soundbite world. I can't get it in my 30 seconds of tell me exactly what I need to do. Right. And sometimes we boil the ocean. Let's give these folks 1, 2, maybe 3 things. And then let them get good at that. And then let's come back around.
Well, and that's the other thing is if you get somebody who wants to know more, they're going to ask.
Absolutely.
Right? So go high level and let them drill down. Yep. Not start 15 levels down where they're going, I missed something, and they tune out.
Right. Well, and Evan, I'm curious about your opinion on this as well. But what I've noticed is as soon as somebody starts to have an aha moment, there's a bit of a delay. When they start to process all this in, because it's like a ocean wave hit them in the face and they're like, whoa, I never understood. Now I understand.
Right. Yeah.
And so it can be overwhelming. Would you say, Brad and Evan, that's been your experience as well as you kind of work with folks out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as soon as you get that level of understanding where they're getting what it is you're saying and they can personalize it, especially at home, because people care about protecting themselves more than they care about protecting companies, usually, their employers. So when you put it in those terms, there's that aha moment. And then, there's a little bit of a freak out period. And then once you kind of come down from that, it's like, okay, what do I need to do? It's funny because when we did a study, of 500 some odd, I call it, like you said, I call them normal people. We asked them one open-ended question, which was, what can we do as security professionals to make your life better? And overwhelmingly, the key word was simple. Make it simple. And that's cool because we know that complexity is the enemy of security. So we have a win-win situation here if we can do it right. Make it simple and win, with reducing risk. So, same thing.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, going back just because it's fresh is this current IR we're working. And when the COO had that, I thought we were protected, like that process you could hear in his voice that I thought we had it. And then exactly what you just said. Okay. And you could just hear him processing. Okay. How bad exactly? Like he finally, it took about a week.
Sure.
And then he kind of got it, and it was Yeah, exactly. And now he's very much unhappy with how things were, but he understands. And, in the credit, they're doing the right things now to move forward, which is good. But I think it goes back to, I think he was being fed not the right information.
Well, and I think I blame a little bit of society and the consumer, right? So because the average human in technology right now is frankly unaware of how their data is being used, misused, right? Mm-hmm. They're ill-informed. And if they were informed better on the topic, I think people would feel a lot different. So we demand that these companies innovate. Well, innovation almost always happens at the expense of security, right? The two don't play together as well as they could or as they should. And so because of that, I think folks feel like maybe they need to feed some bad information, or they need to cut a corner here or there, because we got to hit that release date. And if we actually fix the holes we found, we're going to blow our release date by 6 weeks. We can't have that. Let's just get it out, and then we'll patch it on the back end.
Well, I wonder how much of it is also, and I know I've seen this as you bring it up, is, well, they're not going to get it. So if I just tell them whatever, they'll leave me alone.
Yep. And 100%.
And they're not doing things correctly or whatever.
Right.
And those questions would be useful.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could almost, you can't do it, but turn back the clock and sort of do this over again. Where things were simpler because it was easier to secure things. And then as we add new technology, sort of built security into it, build education into it. But we went too fast, and we've gotten so far down this road now that we'll need to get really creative on how we're going to sort of reel this thing back in. I know that there's, you see in the news all the time about, Apple's pushing for a new privacy regulation in the federal government, and so is Google, and so is Microsoft. But these are the biggest offenders. So, you wonder, can you trust them? Because they continue to kind of put us in this hole. But then again, they're sort of pushed towards that, by the consumer. So it's definitely a catch-22 that we're going to have to address at some point.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I mean, I think we've got there's a lot of good people out there working on this, but it's an uphill battle.
Well, and it comes down to, what does the consumer want? At the end of the day, the consumer is what drove all of this. Why do you have seatbelts? Why do you have airbags? Why do you have, right? Because the consumer, using their vote, voice, and wallet, that's what drives this, at least in this country. That's what drives us, right? If you stop giving money to Apple stops making product, right? So I think we have to, to Evan's point, we have to be creative. But I think it's a larger conversation that says, as a society, are we willing to pump the brakes a little bit on tech? Right? We're starting to get into, as my non-IT buddy describes it, you guys are going to start the apocalypse with your AI terminators, right? I mean, we're actually getting to that point in tech. And then, what have we done to secure the infrastructure that powers these things, these surgery robots, these other things that are becoming more commonplace every day?
Right.
And unfortunately, I think it is going to take a mass event. I don't think a company losing data, therefore some dollars, therefore being embarrassed, is going to jolt society. I think, unfortunately, it's going to come down to physical impact of that.
Or at least the fine is more than their profit off of doing wrong.
Yep.
They don't care if they get $5 million on $10 billion of revenue.
Right.
Well, and we're in the three of us and others, many others, are sort of in this grassroots effort. And I think, we will be better when we sort of unify. And so I know that we're starting kind of down that path, and there's many organizations, but really getting a single sort of voice will go a long ways. One of the things that I had a meeting last Thursday with a guy who's he's got a significant investment from Facebook and Zuckerberg's foundation to combat sex crimes and to combat sex trafficking. So there's promise there, because that's the one thing. I have a daughter. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I can kind of live a little bit with the privacy issues. Maybe I can sort of live with the financial issues because I'm not really held liable for that anyway. But one of the things that I can't ever accept is, the whole safety issue and the sexual, sex trafficking piece. So if nothing else motivates people, hopefully that will.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Evan, and frankly, we're seeing more of that, and I think there's a gap, and that's parents. Yeah. So just think about birds and bees for a second, and how vastly different that conversation is from 10 years ago. Well, the cell phone makes parenting harder.
Yeah.
Hands down, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of parents use it as an excuse to not be involved in their digital lives. We had to invent backseat reminders because people kept leaving their kids in the car. Well, let's talk about what they're really doing that's got them so distracted that they're leaving their kid behind in a car. Right. 9 times out of 10, you're going to see that they were responding to their phone.
Right. First thing they do, check it.
10 years ago, I don't remember there being a huge rash of people leaving their kids in cars, right? I mean, let's think about some of those digital problems that, to Evan's point, raising a teenager these days and navigating digital dating.
Oh yeah.
What a nightmare.
Yeah. That's one of the parts that parents talk I do is it's uncomfortable. I mean, really uncomfortable, because we know and have seen the stories of what happens, and to these parents, you can just see the color drain from their faces, and jaws drop, and almost that panic set in behind, in the back of the eye, in the eye, you can see this, and there's a lot of parts of that the presentation. It's an hour and a half talk, and the for that being 5 or 6 slides of this, it gets by far the most Q&A, because it's like oh.
Well, it is. It's that aha, right? Yeah. If you don't know, you don't know, and
it's then more OS moment rather than the aha. But yes.
Yeah. Well, and we've all talked to parents, guys. I mean, your gut feel. What percentage of parents do you think actually know what their children are doing on iPads and iPhones and Androids?
Less than 2.
I was going to say less than 10.
Yeah, less than 2%.
So that's scary as hell when you think about it, because you're bringing the dangerous world of the internet into their bedrooms at night, and you're not putting the proper restrictions because you don't even know how big the problem is. Right. I mean, it goes back to kind of what we were talking about with, liability and companies. If you don't know what the problem is, how the hell are you going to fix it? And so, that's the scary part for me, is just parents don't even know what their kids are doing. I remember when I was a kid, my father, I told this to Minnetonka School District, when I was a kid, my father had Playboy magazines, like most fathers probably did. And I'm a kid. I'm curious. I do things that kids do. All kids, they still do it today. And I would go into my dad's closet. I knew where they were, and I would look at them. Well, nowadays, you've got it at your fingertips. The kids have it on their phones. They can do it, and it's hardcore stuff. I mean, devious stuff. So then they get desensitized to all this, and then you just raise a generation of sexual deviance. I mean, it just gets worse.
Yeah, one of the positives was out of that speech. The lady I was talking to over the holiday, she said, yeah, now she used to let her take the phones and tablets and everything. Now they have a charging station downstairs. Everybody has to leave their phone downstairs when they go to bed. And she goes, I'd never even thought of it until that. And so it works. Like I think parents overall want to do the right thing. They just don't know.
Exactly. They don't know. At my house, it was a little bit different. And if you're a T-Mobile customer, they have this. I think all the other phone services now finally have it as well. We would put schedules. Mm-hmm. Those data plans would shut off.
Yep.
And there was restriction on the Wi-Fi. It went dark at a certain point. We, scheduled it, and he had his MAC address, right, for the tech folks in the room, the unique identifier, right, for his device. So I knew which was the phone and which was the PlayStation and all that. There was no internet access.
Right.
It just was revoked.
My daughters have Netflix and Prime Video until from bedtime until when they go upstairs for about an hour and a half.
Sure.
And that's it. Everything else is nope.
Yep.
And they're totally okay with it. They don't need that other stuff. They're watching, The Office, which I can't argue with, or Parks and Rec, right? So they're getting into fun shows, but it's scary. You don't know what they're doing.
Well, and they don't need to be exposed to that garbage right before bed. I mean, let's just be honest. You go through a comment section, pick a social media. I don't care what it is.
Never read the comments.
Well, it could be the most entertaining part of your day. It could be the most depressing part of your day, right? True. And it could be in the same, posting. So I think it's...
I pulled an Evan with my alerts there.
Uh-oh.
Okay, sorry.
But I think, that's the other thing we're not thinking about is the long-term psychological and sociological impact of this trash dump of behavior.
Right. And I think it's still so new. We're just starting to understand, or it takes years to study this stuff. Well, what is the impact going to be?
It does and it doesn't. I'll say it this way. The way that we behave online, we would never, even today,
absolutely,
would never do in person.
The anonymity gives people...
it's a keyboard courage. Right. It's insane. And then, and the problem is unfortunately, human beings love sensationalism. They love shiny objects, if you will, right? We're still very primal in that regard. So the trashier the content, the more inflammatory the responses, the more attention it gets.
Right.
A positive post is not as likely to go viral as a negative post tearing somebody down.
Right.
And the kids mentally aren't mature enough to make some of that discernment, you know? And so what do they see? They see popularity is equal to being nasty. And, to Evan's point about raising a generation of sexual deviants, I don't want to raise a generation of giant flaming a-holes either.
Right.
And that's
why I think you need to wait. Did you see that story of the University of Tennessee? There was that fourth grader that made his own shirt and was bullied at school.
No,
and it was that hand-drawn shirt, and it looks like, one kid drew it, and he was getting just bullied about it, and UT licensed it, and it's now an officially licensed shirt.
Nice.
That's what you have to do.
That is exactly.
We need to see more of that. Get that publicized versus all the negativity that's out there.
And I think part of the conversation is this all fits back into security as well, because it's how we're conducting ourselves on social media that's giving the bad guys what they need to be able to victimize us.
Right. Yeah. I'll show you this here in a second after the show. So we are down to about 10 minutes or so left. So let's talk about the news real quick. Couple things on the register.co.uk. Massachusetts City tells ransomware scumbags to riot off. Our IT staff will handle this easily. And the image that they picked for that story is fantastic. I love the Register. It's just the guy giving to the computer. So City of New Bedford, Massachusetts, they shored up their defenses, restored from backups, and are rebuilding systems. And that was it. They over the 4th of July, they found some unusual activity. Once they determined it was riot, they were able to limit the impact. They said there was about, where did it go? I just had it up, 150-ish machines, 158 machines out of 3,500 that were compromised. Minimal impact. No major systems were impacted. So it's like we were talking about. You can see these stories actually happening. If you're doing your backups right, you're air gapping, you have good monitoring in place, you know what's out there, you have a good ass inventory. It's not that hard to be able to mitigate and minimize that damage.
I would say, ransomware isn't quote unquote preventable yet,
right?
Because we haven't gotten the behavior change we need. but being laid out for days or having to pay the ransom is preventable. To your point, make a backup, have it offline. It's going to save you. It's going to save you 100% of the time.
I was going to do a story, and it almost did autoplay ad, which, by the way, are infuriating. All right, Evan, anything to add there?
I agree.
Go do Evan's ransomware readiness out on our website. That'll tell you where you're at. Next one was off of Vice.com. DMVs are selling data to private investigators. And this one is, it surprised me. I didn't realize it, because you think, right, the DMVs, the government, they don't sell, that would be the one place that wouldn't necessarily do it. And it seems like it was a good law back in the early 90s that had unintended consequences.
Well, and having read that article, the quote that says, well, at least we're not selling your social security number, I think is what stood out most to me. It's this attitude that you gave us the data, therefore it's ours. Because we don't have a privacy law in this country that says otherwise. The attitude of these institutions, be it government entities, be it corporate entities, is you gave it to us and therefore it's now ours and we'll do with it as we see fit. Real quick, I'll tell you, look at 23andMe and what they did. They swore they'd never sell data. Well, we see them having now sold data.
Money talks.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got laws from, early 90s, before the internet was a thing, before privacy was a thing, and that desperately need to be updated to be relevant now. And well, we won't make this a political show, but it might be a while. Next one was off of GB Hackers. Unpatched Android 0-day vulnerability let hackers escalate privilege and take control of device. This was you read that article, that headline, you're like, oh my goodness. Well, you actually have to download a package first in order to execute it to get it. So it's not quite as bad, but then I remember how easy it is to get people to click on things and go, oh yeah, that's right.
Well, and part of that is the sensationalism, right?
Yeah.
Is not necessarily helping us in the InfoSec industry.
Well, and I think to me, what was frustrating is, the company found it, ZDI, they initially reported it to Google on March 13th. Google confirmed it on June 28th and nothing. So since, in the last 2 months, they've been trying to get an update. What's going on? Hey, we're going to release the report that there's a 0-day, nothing. Okay, here it is. Right. Why hasn't Google done anything about it?
Well, it's funny because it's in their own backyard, is my opinion. Because they were quick to say Apple had some problems.
Oh yeah, and they do a lot of really good research around security.
They do,
and
it's back to sensationalism.
Yeah.
If you really read the story behind the Apple exploit and the narrow scope in which it actually existed versus in the wild,
right?
But the headline that was out there and what the talking points were from Google's release was very much pointed at Apple.
Mm-hmm.
What becomes interesting is when two competing companies start doing security inspection on each other,
it's that arms race.
Where's the truth lie?
Yeah, very true. You have to be able to read between the lines. But from a security perspective, I mean, we do benefit from it when they start, really digging in and finding these things. So there is that, as long as they actually address them and fix them.
Right, because if it's too juicy, it gets turned into a cyber weapon and we don't get to hear about it.
True. That's a good point. All right. Next one, again, off of GB Hackers, but I've seen this all over the place. Massive data leak, 419 million Facebook users' phone numbers exposed. And I like how Facebook's response was, well, we haven't used that for like a year. We disabled that, but the database had been updated like 2 weeks prior to the thing. So it's like, guy, come on. At what point, how many leaks does Facebook have to have before there's some sort of repercussion?
Facebook can have limitless leaks until we stop playing.
Although
we got to stop participating and giving them our money and our data.
I did see was it Senator Wyden, I think is who it was saying that, he thinks that Zuckerberg and the executives should face jail time because they intentionally misled during the investigation of the initial breaches. That if a financial CEO had misled on the financials and all that is similar to what he had done,
right?
That they would be facing criminal charges and jail time. I think it's going to take something like that for some of these companies to actually care.
It is. The challenge there, though, is, I mean, let's not get political, but
right.
but let's just realize that a company that big and the people and players and the donations and the such, I think it takes some time to for that change to happen. Facebook got in a ton of trouble. They paid the largest fine in history.
It was a fraction of what they profited off of it.
$5 billion fine.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, whatever, moving on.
Right.
Well, what's a campaign contribution?
Right.
Right.
Oh, I know.
So I love that I see folks trying to do that.
What's it going to take? Yeah.
I just look back to what we lived through in 2008. Who really paid for that whole disaster, right? So,
right. Well, I think you're right. I think the consumers are the ones that are going to speak.
We got to speak
with
our
voice. People quit using it, and you're already seeing that, I think, to some extent. But
Facebook's now getting into dating. So maybe another topic for another show, but there's a very large amount of very digital, to use your language, digital immigrants who are now entering the dating world because maybe that first marriage has come to an end. Maybe someone's passed along, and the platform there is dating and your Tinder.
What's up, Evan?
Get your ass off the couch and date the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I don't know. These days, talking to the single guys, Evan, it sounds like that might not work as well as it used to.
Stop being lazy. If you want to find the right mate, get out and find her.
I joke with my wife that there's no way. I'm never gonna leave because I never deal with dating. That's not the reason I wouldn't, but I've seen what the legal people go through.
Yeah, it's different out there. My buddy tells me, he says, if she doesn't swipe right, it's not right.
I know. Yeah. Talk about speaking a different language,
right?
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, that was a lot. Thank you for joining, Ryan. So I could glad to be here to talk about it. And even though Evan apparently, has something against you, Evan,
come on, man.
I love that delay.
Hey, I love Ryan. I just, I don't like his smell.
There you go. I will say it was very nice of you to come in so that, I did have somebody here. It's a lot of fun to have. It's a lot easier to do these when you have somebody face to face.
Oh, absolutely. Glad to be here, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure, we'll do it again. Evan, have a great time in Bulgaria. Bring home something Bulgarian for me, I guess.
I'll get you something.
I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, seriously.
So, special thank you to all of our loyal listeners. Love the feedback. Really and truly do appreciate everyone listening. And every week, seeing the numbers grow is just, it's very humbling. And, having people say, hey, I listen to you every week it blows my mind. So thank you very much. Send us your feedback at unsecurity@protonmail.com. And you can socialize with us on Twitter. I'm at Brad and I. Evan's at Evan and Francine. And Ryan, you are
at Cloutier Sec.
All right. Thank you all. And we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unsecurity Podcast. We value our listeners and would love to hear from you. Give us your feedback by emailing us at unsecurity@protonmail.com. That's unsecurity@protonmail.com. Be sure to tune in next week to hear the latest insights from Brad and Evan.